Okay, joining us this afternoon or this morning in the United Kingdom is Jono Lance. Now, Jono's been a professional rugby player for over 10 years. He's Australian, even though he's now living and working in the United Kingdom. Also spent some time over here in the Western Force. So, Jono, thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Nice to get up early on my day confined in the house, so it's good to be here.
Yeah. Now, also with us, we've got Nick Burgess, our first 10 halfback, and Justin Lamb, who plays outside centre for us. Now, I'm going to let the boys kind of fire away some questions just to learn a bit about you and your career, and we'll see where it takes us.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Easy. I'll jump into it straight away. So, growing up, you attended TSS, or the Southport School, on the Gold Coast. Obviously, it's quite a rugby nursery there. Could you just tell us about your experiences there and any other sports you played?
Yeah, so went to TSS from year 8. Loved my time at the school, and it is a bit of a rugby nursery, but I think I look back on it, it was a really good school for me, and it's still very close to a lot of my schoolmates. As far as the rugby side of it goes, it definitely was a big aspect of my schooling life. I was lucky enough to have a very good year going through, and my first 15 coach in year 11 and 12 was Matt Taylor. And I think of our year, we had 9 guys going to play Australian schools in our year 12. So we had an amazing group. And then for that group to sort of 4 or 5 of us to stay together and go into the Reds Academy after school was exciting. So I think, yeah, as you said, we definitely had quite a professional setup when we were at school, and I think that was attributed to Matt Taylor, who went on to become a defence coach at the Reds in 2011. So there was a good group of us who did year 11 and 12 at school with our coach, and then had him throughout at the Reds Academy and in at the Reds. So yeah, it was definitely an exciting time.
Yeah, sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
Going on to the next one, just either playing for TSS or just any club team. What would you have to say was your best sporting win as a junior?
Yeah, definitely at school. There's a few of them. In year 12, we had quite a unique situation where obviously at school we only played each team once. And the team we had in the last game of the year was Brisbane State High. And they had Matt Tamua, Andrew McCulloch, Will Tupou, who's playing in Japan now. And that was the grand final. Both teams were undefeated, and that was going to be the grand final to see who won it all. And I can talk about that now because we ended up winning that game. But yeah, I think the biggest one for me was Nudgee against TSS was like our big rivalry. It was my first game of first 15 rugby in year 11, and it was at Nudgee, and it's tough to go there and win as a kid. I think there would have been 6,000 to 8,000 people there for the game. I definitely remember the change room before it. Our coaches were firing up, and young school kids definitely can get into the heat of the moment. And as you came out of the change room, our school had lined up from the change room to the field, but there was too many students, so they had to sort of weave the way to the ground. So I ended up running out of this tunnel and out of the change rooms. You're running through your schoolmates and teachers and stuff, lining up for about 400 metres. I was exhausted by the time I got to the field, but I look back on that moment, it was pretty exciting. So that for me, Nudgee away.
Score any tries in the game?
I didn't get any tries, but we won the game. So to be honest, I don't remember too much of the game. I remember the tunnel, and I remember doing the school ball cry after it. But in terms of the rugby.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in '07, you were picked in the Australian schoolboys team, and shortly after that, the Australian under-20s. What memories do you have of representing your age at that level?
Yeah, with the schoolboys, we played one of our games at TSS, which was an amazing experience to play in front of the students and your teachers. It was always a big goal of everyone who was playing first 15 rugby to play for the Australian schoolboys, and we had a big group of us in that game. And then, as I said a bit earlier, after school, a lot of us from my first 15 went on to be in the Reds Academy and then play Australian under-20s together as well. So we all always drove each other and had ambitions and to go on and play professional rugby. And I think having that good group of us going through year 11 and 12 and sort of pushing each other, and ended up living with 4 of my schoolmates in a house to go to academy training together. I think the best moment for me was probably that Australia schoolboys game against England at my school. And our under 20s, we made the final against New Zealand, but we didn't win that. We actually, they smashed us that day, so we won't talk about that. But the experience of going to Argentina as a group of 19-year-olds, it might have been tough for the team manager, but it was a great experience for 30 19-year-olds going to Argentina for 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to know that you it was very cool, because I'm in the Force Academy. It's cool to make that link of you and your mates going into the Reds Academy. It's cool.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Now I'll hop in here, Jono, mainly because I'll probably remember this more than the boys will. But fast forward 2011, and you make your Super Rugby debut at Queensland. Ended up being their premiership winning year. I imagine the whole state and rugby was almost at at the forefront of sport there at that time. And the style you guys played under Ewan McKenzie and the team you had. The Super Rugby final that year at Suncorp, sold out. Must be one of your greatest memories. Like you were, I think, 21 or 22, playing fullback against a Crusaders team. And we can just drop these names: Sonny Bill, Dan Carter, Kieran Reid, Richie McCaw, the White Locks, Brad Thorne, the whole All Black front row. You're pretty much playing the All Blacks, mate. What are your memories from that night?
Yeah, I get tingles now thinking about it. For me, like, I played sevens that year, so I actually didn't play too much for the Reds in that year. And my first game was actually against the Force 2 weeks before the semi-final. There was a few injuries, and as luck had it, I got an opportunity 2 weeks before the semi-finals and played the Force away, and we won. And then we went to Waikato and beat the Chiefs in the last game. And I'd played all right in those 2 games, and we were winning and on a bit of a roll. So Ewan had decided to, with a few guys coming back from injury, to keep me in. He thought he'd keep the team rolling. And then as far as the final goes, unbelievable night. As we came out of the change room, there was a huge banner that would have been probably 40 metres long that just had signatures and signed from all people from Queensland around it. So you walk past that tunnel, and then as you come around the corner, it was just all red. And you could hear the "We Are Queensland" chant, and we ran out, and there's 52,500 people going nuts. I'd just turned 21, and it was my 4th game of Super Rugby, so I was definitely pretty nervous. Interesting story. So the week before I was off the kickoff, I was back left, and a schoolmate of mine from TSS, Ben Tapuai, was back right. But as he was left-footed, we decided to swap for the grand final. And so it was going to be me or him receiving the kickoff, most likely, whichever way they went. And I was back right, and I was looking at Dan Carter, who was holding the ball, and he just was looking at me smiling, and I was like, what's he doing? And he just gave me a wink and sort of pointed at me. I was like, oh, God, he's kicking to me. And so I looked up, and it was Richie McCaw, Sonny Bill, Kieran Reid, and Robbie Fruin just standing in front of me. I just remember thinking, oh, my God. And so I put the kick up, and the ball was in the air, and I just think, catch it, catch it, catch it. And so as I called it, I was like, get away from those guys. And so I took one step left to get away from them, and the winger, Zach Guilford, cut me in half. So I managed to hold onto the ball and get the ball back, and it was probably the most relieved in my life, I reckon, was just being at the bottom of the ruck, having successfully caught the ball and the ball being placed back. But that's probably the most unique moment in my rugby career, just having Dan Carter wink at me, just saying, like, I'm about to kick the ball to you, do your best.
It's pleasing to know for all the amateurs out there that they're not alone in getting those feelings when they're playing contact sport, that they're about to get trampled kind of thing, or and they're coming to get you. So and at the full time, it must have been great scenes, because part of that, and there was a young group, Cooper, Genia, and co, that were, not sure their ages, but they were pretty young at the time, and it must have been a bit of a surreal feeling for the whole group.
Yeah, there was a line out in the 77th minute or 78th minute, and we were up by 4. And I was defending at 10. And as I said, Ben Tupwire, who I went to school with, he was this next to me. And I remember looking at him, he just gave me this nod. He's like, let's do this. And like, I was 21, he was 22. Quade was 23. I think Liam Gill was on at the time. He'd just turned 18. He was at 7. I think the average age would have been about 23 or 24, brought up by Radiki Samo being about 46 at the time. So, yeah, it was an unbelievable moment. And that last 2 minutes was just like you couldn't hear yourself think. It was just insane. And when full time happened, yeah, it was a great moment and one that I definitely will never forget. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Awesome. So, sorry, what was that?
No, you're up, Justin. It's all good.
So you spent a couple more seasons at the Reds before moving to the Waratahs, then back over here to the Western Force. Before your decision to boot them from the competition, sent you to the Reds via the Rebels. Your 2 seasons over here at the Force, you played some of your best rugby. What was it like being part of that?
Yeah, I actually lived in Perth for 3 years when I was young. I went to Newman College. I moved there. Dad actually used to coach the Western Reds rugby league team, or the Perth Reds they changed to. So Perth was always somewhere that I had family and I loved. My best mate from school, Luke Morahan, he had moved to the Force a few years before, and I mentioned before Ben Tapai was in a position where he was looking for a club, and we were all sort of contacting each other. And I'd had a good 2 years in Sydney with the Waratahs, but in terms rugby-wise, I didn't get too many opportunities because Bernard and Kirtley were at the peak of their powers. So it was great for me to have 2 of your friends playing their best rugby, and being on the bench behind that was pretty frustrating. So we all sort of spoke, and the Force were quite keen to get me there, and I was obviously keen to get back to Perth. And Luke spoke about the place and loved living in Perth, loved the group there. So for 3 schoolmates from the same backline as we were in year 11 and 12 to be able to get to Perth was really exciting. And I remember rocking up at pre-season. A lot of my old mates who I'd played with were there at the time. And it was just a really good feel about it. And yeah, to play those 2 years was amazing. And I really do think that in that second year that the Force had got it right. There was some unique things the Western Force do that was different to the East Coast teams in terms of like a Force, you get given a Force family, and if you're from the East Coast, they do a lot of things to help out. So that second year, all the turmoil that went down was definitely annoying, but we definitely were stronger as a group because of it. And we played some really good footy that year. And unfortunately, that last game of Super Rugby was our last one, which we weren't sure, but we definitely put in a pretty good performance against the Waratahs. So, yeah.
That's awesome to be a part of that, like, family bond and with your mates. Cool.
Yeah, I think that was one of the great things about Perth. Was that all the Perth guys seemed to be from Hale school, so it was good to have those guys to, I suppose, show us the ropes around Perth. But because it was a lot of guys who've moved a long way to pursue a rugby career, you're sort of all in it together and do become one big family. And a few of them are still there at the moment who I keep in contact with closely. Ian Price, captain, he's someone who I played with since I was 18, and there's definitely still a good family there. Big Heath Testament, he's a bit old now. Hopefully he watches this, but he's still at the club. Marcel Brach, he's still there. So I think the dream still lives on, and I don't think it'll end. I think, unfortunately, coronavirus has affected it this year for the Force, but they've got the right people there at the moment.
Awesome. So that all came to an abrupt end when Force given the boot. What was it like for those few moments with the uncertainty that was surrounding the team and the connection of your own job security?
Yeah, it was definitely a tough time. For me, it was frustrating because I would move to the Waratahs and then move to the Force, and I sort of felt like I'd found my home and where I'd wanted to be for, I suppose, the foreseeable future in my rugby career. And to push on at the Force was the goal. As I said, and as you guys have pointed to, it definitely brought us all together a lot more. We were a pretty tight bunch that year, and It was a bit of a us against them mentality, which I think played over into our games. We came second in the Australian Conference, and at the end of the year, we were playing some really good rugby. But yeah, there were definitely other stresses. It was unique circumstances. You were trying to organise Plan B contracts and a whole bunch of things that if it went along how we were hoping it wouldn't, you were comfortable. And we had a lot of support from the Players Association and a whole bunch of stuff. So it was tough and very unique and brought us all together and tested us emotionally. But I reckon you'd probably ask a lot of the guys, we're probably all better people from it. We definitely learned a lot that year and not learn a lot from what we did right, but also I think learn a lot from what we did wrong. And I think, yeah, we all definitely grew from it. So look back on it, it was a tough 6 months. It sort of just kept dragging out. I don't necessarily agree with it, but yeah, we definitely stayed together, which was the main thing.
Yeah, certainly brings out character.
Yeah.
So if you've answered part of this, do you still keep in touch with close people from the force? And you mentioned Air Pryor and Heath and Marcel. But what do you miss? What do you miss the most about Perth?
Yeah, definitely keep in touch with the guys, and guys have got in touch with me about going to the force. I was at the Reds with Andrew Reddy, and he asked me about the opportunities to go there, and I spoke about the place, which I think put it in a good light for him to know that it is a great part of the world. My memories, I lived in Cottesloe, so I could walk down to the beach. That's one of the good memories for me. Just getting to and from training was very easy. We had, like, the training facilities at the Force were unbelievable. And the main thing for me that I look back on is that sort of family feel you had, because guys had moved from South Africa, guys had moved from the East Coast. It's a long way to go. All your family's back where you're from, so you become your own family. So yeah, on the weekend you'd catch up, you'd have a beer, go around, have dinner together, and yeah, that sort of just went along for 2 years, and it probably went too quick because I was having such a good time. But yeah, look back on those 2 years very fondly, and Perth is definitely somewhere that I think the East Coast of Australia needs to maybe not go there as much, because it's amazing, because it is so isolated and yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. One more question from me. What are your experiences in the academy? So, like, how long did you spend in it, and what did you take most out of it?
Yeah, I was in the Reds Academy for 2 years after school. I didn't go straight into that. I went and played just club rugby for UQ in Brisbane, but UQ had their own academy that was, I suppose, dedicated to people like me, and Ian Pryor was in that with me. We were in the uni academy. It was almost like a halfway house for people who want to push on with their rugby career and take it seriously. And UQ was a club that was definitely pushing in the right direction and getting some good young players involved. For me, that year was amazing. I went to college at university and had a great year, but I always had ambitions to get to the Reds and play professional rugby. And me and Ian Pryor sort of kept tabs on that and pushed each other hard to make that happen. I then went into the Reds Academy, which was at the time quite a small setup, and I think worked really well. There was, I think, 10 to 12 of us in that at the time. And we would train full time if you could, just with the Red squad. But they were very flexible with the university and studies. But of that group, I think 70-80% of us pushed on to be in the Reds within the 2-3 years. For me, it didn't go as smoothly. I sort of got to the point where, I don't know, I wasn't really kicking on in my second year, and got the opportunity to play for Australian Sevens. And I think that brought back I suppose, not brought back, but like made me realise that I don't think I was training as hard as I could. I don't think I thought I was fit, and going to play Sevens, you'll realise one thing, and whatever you thought about fitness, you were wrong. So to go and play for the Aussie Sevens and get a full year of training in that environment under my belt was, I think, exactly what I needed for my career. to realise how much you need to push yourself, how hard you need to train. Because sevens is a different beast when it comes to fitness and the running you have to do. And that's why, like, I always still watch the Aussie sevens now. And I think Louis Holland, he just came into the system when I was there, and I have no idea how he's still playing sevens. So that actually sort of springboarded me into the Reds. I came back from that sevens year and had played pretty good, and just luckily put me in a position where a few injuries happened and took my opportunity. Yeah.
Awesome. Cheers.
On a more somber tone, kind of, we've spoken about your highlights, like your 2011 Queensland Premiership win, but there was a significant hurdle that you faced back in 2016 when you were on the Wallabies tour. Obviously, you suffered an injury which ruled you out of the tour and your opportunity to debut for your country. How did you manage that mentally, and do you have any advice for any of the boys who are having their own battles kind of now at school?
Yeah, I think looking back on that, that's definitely the toughest moment of my career, and I do look back on it. Unfortunately, I'm a select member of a unique group, and that's the Once Were Almost Wallabies. I was on the bench against France, and I was getting ready to go on, but France scored with, I think, 9 minutes to go to bring the game to within 5. And then understandably, you don't make a change in the inside backs in a close game with 5 minutes to go. So I understood that, and that was probably the most bittersweet moment of my life, to be in the change room after the game. A few guys received their caps, being extremely disappointed that I didn't get on, then feeling guilty about being disappointed because I was in the Wallaby change room and we just won a test match. And if that was another crazy moment because 4 of the guys in the Wallaby 23 that day, I was in year 12 with at school. So it was me, Rob Simmons, James Slipper, and Luke Morahan were all in that match that day. And we'd all gone to.
Did you ever actually lose the game at Southport? Like, there shouldn't be any excuse. The more you talk, the more it's like, you know.
Yeah, we lost one game. Lost one game.
Sure.
We were undefeated in year 12. We lost one game in year 11.
Okay.
But we did have. It was a pretty crazy year 11 and 12 GPS setup. I think like Nudgy had James O'Connor, Dom Shipley, like a few other guys who went on and played. Like they had 6 Aussie schoolboys. As I said, Brisbane State High had Matt Tamua, Andrew McCulloch. Ipswich Grammar like had Rod Davies, Albert Ane. Like every team was sort of littered with guys who went on and played. And I think that's one thing that made the Reds quite strong in 2010 or 2010 to 2013.
Yeah.
It was a group of guys who'd versed each other since the age of 15.
Yeah.
And knew each other since the age of 15. So I think that was definitely one of the things that helped drive us after school. To go back to what we were talking about before, being in that change room was surreal. As I said, I actually felt guilty at being annoyed, and I was like, okay, I'm here now. My opportunity will come. And then that Tuesday we had a midweek game against the French Barbarians team, and 5 minutes into that game, broke my arm. Like straight away, I knew I'd broken it. And then flew back to Perth to have surgery. And at the time, I was like, okay, I've been in the system. I'll get back there now. But the arm sort of affected my pre-season. So the start of that year for the Force, I definitely wasn't in the best shape I'd been. I'd only just sort of got back to full fitness 2 weeks before the season started. And I think I was playing with a bit of anger that year at the start of the year, just to try and like prove and putting a bit of extra pressure on me to get into that setup. And there are a few things that obviously happened that year with the Force, obviously being under that pressure as well. It was definitely a tough year, and I look back on it now and still get a little bit frustrated, but it is such a surreal moment to be in that setup. And I'm not alone in the Once Were Almost Wallabies. There is a few of us, and we do laugh about it now, but I think we laugh about it and then cry ourselves to sleep. But in terms of advice for dealing with that sort of stuff, obviously talking about it is the main thing. I think once you get stuff off your chest, it does make it a lot easier. And as I said, having people who've been in that position before, there is a few of us who are the once were almost Wallabies, and we do, like, when I see those guys, I'll talk to them because they're guys who I've played with in my career. It is funny, and you sort of got to put it into perspective. I put myself in a position to get there and get on the bench, and it didn't work out, but I definitely worked hard for that for about 8 or 9 years of my life. So I was pretty happy to get into the squad and train and be a part of it. And I'll definitely always remember that. But yeah, just that final hurdle.
Yeah. Do like the almost Wallabies have like a coffee club? It sounds like you guys seem to catch up with it.
Not yet. I think we'll present out our own caps eventually one year, I think. And no coffee club yet, but maybe we'll have a dinner one day.
Fair enough. So following the 2018 season at the Reds, you signed a contract with the Worcester Warriors. What's your time been like there? And
need to work on that pronunciation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think I'm pronouncing that right.
Worcester.
Like the sauce.
Yeah, we just call it sauce here.
Yeah. And how does the Northern Hemisphere rugby compare to what we play here?
Yeah, so at the end of the 2017 season with the Force, we got given a pretty unique opportunity to come to Worcester for 3 months on it was called a medical joker contract. If a team in the Northern Hemisphere has a few injuries, they can get someone in on a short-term 3-month contract to, I suppose, play. And I came over. I lived in England for a few years as a kid. My dad coached rugby league in Leeds. So after Perth, I moved to Leeds, and I remember it vividly, going to the smaller stadiums that were packed, the crazy crowds, the songs, the band. And for me to get that opportunity to come to England and play was something that I had always would have loved to do. And yeah, to get that opportunity to come over on that medical joker, I jumped at it, especially after all that happened at the Force. I was pretty keen to get out of Australia and freshen up and get away from Australian rugby, just to, I suppose, get my head right and enjoy rugby again with a bit less pressure. So to come to Worcester was a great opportunity for me to get to English rugby. We went on a bit of a roll there. When I'd got over, we went to Leicester, which is one of the proudest clubs in England. And I think Worcester had never won at Welford Road, which is their home ground. And we won that game. And all the games are just like an hour and a half bus ride away from home, which is amazing as well. It's like you're playing club rugby for Soaks, but in a professional environment. So it was an amazing setup for that. And I had such a good time in my 3 months here that when I got back to Australia, I was pretty keen to get back over to England. And I think Worcester were in a pretty similar position where after I left, they were pretty keen to get me back. So it was a bit of a no-brainer for me to head back over. In terms of the Northern Hemisphere rugby, I'd always thought when I got over, it was going to be like what you hear, it was going to be slow and their guys aren't as skilled as the Aussie guys. And I think that's purely weather. You're going to be stupid if you're going to go into a wet game or a muddy game and try and play how we play in Australia. We're lucky enough that we probably are in the best country in the world for the weather. And as a result of that, we can set a game plan, and we're probably going to be comfortable playing that on the weekend. But here it is such a unique setup that you've got your game plan, you've got skillful guys, the weather takes a turn. Okay, we need to change how we're going to play. So I think, yeah, coming over here has made me a better rugby player in that sense. Learning different ways of playing the game, different ways of adapting to the weather. Or it was the wettest winter in England's history, so I've definitely got used to wet weather rugby since I've been here. But yeah, I've loved my time over here.
Yeah, it seems a bit different to the sunny winters of Australia.
Yeah, definitely different.
In your 10 years almost 10 years of being a professional rugby player, you've played with, just reading off the names here, some pretty big people: Pocott, Hooper, Genia, Foley, Pilotta now, Folau. Oh, not Folau anymore, but
No, you can still say for Lau.
We talk a fair bit at Hale about like what it takes to be a team player. Who's the best team man you've been associated with and played alongside, and like what made him so special?
Yeah, it's definitely the pick of the questions. I think I've been lucky enough to be a part of teams that have gone on winning streaks and won Super Rugby titles, and just seen also what it takes to be in teams, I suppose, pushing and trying to deal with the stresses of that. I think one thing about being in Worcester is there is relegation, and you find a lot about yourself and your teammates and your coaches when there is relegation on the line, because if your team gets relegated, that's a whole different beast. And that's something that I was amazed. You come over here, and my 2 years at Worcester, when in that medical joker, and last year being in a relegation battle, as I said, you find out a lot about yourself. For me, there are a lot of the best coaches I've had with Ewan and Checker at the Waratahs. They always talk about the same sort of stuff, and it's good people make good rugby players. And I think if you get to this position, you're obviously already a pretty good rugby player, but it's the good people who really kick on. So it is an amazing question. I think Brendan McKibben's one for me. He's not the biggest name, but when I was at the Reds deciding what I was going to do next, I had a lot of mates at the Waratahs, and I knew Kibbo. But just watching them play that year, every time they scored a try, every time they did anything well, it was 14 other guys getting around the person who just scored the try or made the big tackle. And that was generally led by Brendan McKibben. You'd always see him going over the top, celebrating. And that's when I knew that the Waratahs were onto something right. They were heading in the right direction. I've been lucky enough to play with some amazing people. You've put me on the spot here. And another one, Marcel Brach at the Force. Unbelievable teammate, leader of like the social side of it, but also just constantly driving you to be your best, giving you honest feedback. Someone to perform skills with after training. There's a lot who I've played with, and I'm missing 90% of them. But I think when you get to that level, it genuinely is like a whole squad performance. I think the Waratahs, we went very well in 2014 and won the title as a result of that whole squad. And the 15 guys who started most of the year were playing their best rugby, but I think that's because they had 15 guys training every week who were quite annoyed that they weren't playing, but also really close and good mates with them and wanted to keep pushing them. So our training weeks that year were very intense, because generally it was 15 on 15, and the 15 guys who were starting and playing well knew that if they didn't train well, then the person who was biting at their heels behind them was training well that week. So to have teammates constantly pushing you at training is massive. And I think that's what's allowed me to be in teams that have gone really well during Super Rugby.
Now, Jono, two quick ones to finish with, mate. I'll let you go. What's if you could go back to your 17-year-old self, and playing first 15 rugby at a private school in Australia, what's one bit of advice you'd give them? Might be rugby advice, might be completely unrelated to rugby, but what's one thing you'd tell yourself?
I probably gathered from my answers that I still look back on my school rugby as some of the funnest times of my life, the most fondest memories. I definitely tell my younger self to really remember the moments and cherish it, because your schoolmate to your mate to you carry on with for the rest of your life. I'd tell myself that I think I'm training hard, but I'm not. So I wouldn't have to spend the next 3 years trying to realise that. But yeah, I was lucky enough, and you mentioned it before, being in the Force Academy, and Hale is a great school. So I'm assuming there's probably a few other kids at Hale who are in a similar setup. It's your good mates who you play year 12 with and year 11 with in the first 15. really cherishing those moments and remembering it and singing the war cries and doing all that together. And then after school, reliving those moments and remembering it, but also using those as motivation to push you on, and keeping that close group of guys together, and driving each other to kick on and to play for the Force, because you are in a great position where you and your schoolmates can be the driver for you after you finish school.
Yeah. Now, last question on a lighthearted note, and we got Tuesday here's meat pie day. Don't shake your head, Nick. You don't do this very well either. You're weird with food. It's meat pie day here at all our borders. Yeah, I mean, get given the option of 4 or 5 pies, and so do staff. And some of the things that the borders do with the pies, pretty controversial in terms of taking the roof off. I've heard a story of the actual sauce bottle being pushed to the bottom of the pie, and then they eat it with a spoon. Now, given obviously a rugby union player, if you come from a rugby league family, and there's probably a little bit on the line with how you answer this question, and particularly in England, when you get the mushy peas with the pie as well. But yeah. How does Jono Lance eat a meat pie?
I must admit, I'm not consistent with my eating. I sort of depends on the shape of the pie that I get. If I'm out and I need to keep it clean, and you have the sauce bottle, then I'd puncture the pastry on the top and squeeze the sauce into it, just to keep it clean. If I do have the luxuries of having the pie at home with a plate, I have also been known to cut the lid off, put the sauce around, and then put the lid back on. And then if I'm feeling really crazy, sometimes I just have the pastry itself. Yeah. But I like to think that I am a good pie eater, but that comes down to my adaptation to my surroundings. So,
weird but flexible are the first things that come to mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, John, I won't take any more time. Really appreciate it. Make sure, particularly over there in the UK, you stay safe and healthy next couple of weeks and months, and we can see you back out in the field, hopefully in the not too distant future. But there'll be a lot of kids listening to this, and they would have learned a lot. So thanks for sharing your journey with us today, and you have a good day.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Cheers, guys. Obviously, good luck for what's left with the schooling year and however it's running. My sister's a teacher, so she's giving me the rundown of the challenges with that in Australia at the moment. And you got me on a good day, because it's 10:30 and I've got nothing planned for the rest of the day, so we're good.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Jono.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.